what the hell is going on with this virus here? Seriously, you're an expert on all things. What's happening?
Okay, well, we stay in mission control in our homes. We're pretty safe. But when we go out, what society lacks is the ability to test everybody properly, both blood and with nasal swab. We're missing masks, N95. Everybody should be walking around with those, just like China. And everybody should have a temperature check all day long, just like we see them doing in China. It would be nice to copy somebody that seems to have better success, but we're getting there. We're getting there. We'll be having tests for every citizen in the population soon enough, at least in the hot spots.
So, hey Doc, one of my good friends, I call him my cousin Vinny because he's a great Italian attorney, and he said, John, once they identify a home test, they could solve this thing in a month. And he said, why don't they just buy? You got 350 million people. Why don't they buy 700 million tests and send every person in America two? Okay? You take one now, you report your results. You're negative. You take another one in 2 weeks, you're negative again. Great. You take one now, you're positive. You take one in 2 weeks, now you're positive. Now you're negative again. Great. Fantastic. Somebody who gets two positives goes to the hospital.
Or self
Yeah,
quarantines,
I'm saying,
or
is that reasonable?
what we will probably have in the not too distant future is a home pregnancy style of test. I think we're going to have to prick our finger and bleed a little, but it should be reliable. And then if we're negative, then we know one thing. And if we're positive, we know another. And between the blood tests and the nasal swabs, we'll be able to test ourselves eventually, hopefully in the near future, because I agree, in the privacy of my bathroom or my home is the way to do it to maintain my rights. But right now, I give up a little bit of rights if they could test everybody in New York State, but they don't have enough tests. The government hasn't gotten out the tests that we need in mass quantities. We're talking billions of tests.
Yeah, no, the way I see it, you could test everyone in America two times with less than a billion, about 700, you need 350 million tests times two is a billion, under a billion. But, maybe the government just, what could they be?
Well,
700
what I
million tests.
what I would hope is that if you test negative, you don't go to work with me every day and test yourself a month later and now you're positive. So you want to test regularly for about a year period because this coronavirus has a high rate of mortality, dwarfs anything like the flu in the rate of mortality. So we do want to be able to retest not a month later, because if you went from negative to positive, you got to know quickly. So for a year, expect to be maybe pricking your finger every other day.
Wow. All right. Well, I mean, there's worse things that could happen to us. I talked to another great friend of the show, Professor John Banzaf, and this guy is a public interest attorney, and he leads these consumer advocate lawsuit cases against big tobacco and cutting down on cigarette smoking and all this other stuff, which is great. And he's talking about what everyone's overlooking here is almost all, I don't want to even put a numerical, existence on it, but almost all of the cases of people under 65, the main common or the commonality they had was obesity more than anything else, more than diabetes, more than previous respiratory. Obesity is the largest commonality in it. Can we do something about obesity before the fall to try to also limit a recurrence?
Well, you'll have comorbidity with obesity. Obesity has hypertension and diabetes with it. So it would be nice if our country got skinny. I could lose a few pounds myself, but yeah, that would be great. But I think they've been preaching to us for my entire life that a healthy lifestyle keeps you strong. But let's face it, a lot of people under 65 that had outcome of mortality, morbidity. Uh, Obesity is one of them. Cigarette smoking is a really bad one. Try to get everybody to stop smoking cigarettes because this is an upper respiratory infection. That's a big one. Um, yeah, there's no end to how we can improve society, but that's not going to happen. We're preaching to the choir. Yeah, public health advocates have been doing this for 50 years.
So you don't think this is a good time for social programming?
Oh, it's always a good time to make our population healthier and stronger. That's the bioethical thing to do. But will you be successful while people are sitting in their home with nothing to do but watch TV and eat food? I'm not sure. Good
Well,
luck.
I've had a number of really acclaimed psychiatrists, psychotherapists, disaster social workers on, and many of them say that there's probably a larger and longer lasting social drag on this because people who are in recovery are now turning back to some other vices. People who are almost suicidal are now becoming suicidal. No, I'm being serious.
Oh, I couldn't agree more.
that the
Lent was
social
not followed as exactly as others followed it last year. I have some friends that followed Lent last year, but not this year.
Why? Tell me this from a medical perspective. Why are liquor stores essential?
Well, in moderation, alcohol supposedly is okay. Unfortunately, the ones that do it in moderation probably they're not turning to alcohol in excess now any more than they did beforehand. Whereas when you're stuck here all alone or with your family, which may be better to be alone sometimes, but yeah, it's obvious that we're getting psychosocial effects are incredible to society. Are we getting closer to a wife and children or further? That's a good question.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if they're right. Are they psychosocial or are they extra social? Like this is, you know, I don't even know what the right prefix is, but this is psychosocial sounds too nice for what's happening. It's a forced quarantine. I've been saying to my friends, when we get paroled, I can't look. I'm looking forward to play golf with you again. You know what I mean? It's like a sentence right now.
I couldn't agree more. I study bioethics. I'm going for another graduate degree. Bioethics is based on two things. On the one thing, the public health is very important, but the economics and paying your bills and going to work is very important. And there's a balance. Right now, I'm comfortable that the government had nothing in their armamentarium from a public health standpoint but to lock us in. But quickly, we got to get out. This is no good for anybody to be locked in month after month. I see an end in sight because I believe they're going to come out with dozens of billions, many, many billions of home tests, many, many hundreds of thousands of jobs of people testing temperature on foreheads. We're going to get a lot of face masks for everybody in society. And in this case, the government, okay, let them pay for it. We're spending trillions. Let them pay a little money. I'm more on the libertarian side. So in general, I don't like the government doing anything. But in this case, this is government's role. We need government to step up, get us these tests, get us the face masks, get people out there testing everybody, maybe even provide a card to show that you're tested and either you're negative as of this date or you're positive and resolved. If you're positive and unresolved, which the serological tests will show us, if you're positive and unresolved, I think the government has in the past, and it's legal to quarantine people if you're communicable.
Yeah,
But
I'm with you. That sounds fantastic. But I'm a libertarian too, and one of the things that we convince ourselves it's okay to give the federal government, some control over us is for administering, public safety, like highways and roads and standards and stuff. That's why we're okay. Well, they can tax us on that because they're giving us a a strong army, right? And some of this stuff is how we justify it. But the more I got to start taking my blood and then uploading that result code into some app that goes and tells Microsoft and Google, then me as a libertarian, I start feeling like, we might as well throw out the HIPAA laws and just let people's medical information be open source.
You see, that's the big dilemma because I'm studying bioethics
That's what I
in a
mean. That's why I'm
graduate
asking you.
program. It's a huge issue, but if it's specifically only about the positive, negative results, each citizen has a contract with government and society. We're all part of the society. So if it's this high mortality, highly contagious disease, if we're going to upload just that one piece of information, positive or negative, or if we have the immunoglobulins, that I got to say, without government, my state is less capable of doing it. My county's even less capable. And as an individual, I don't trust everybody out there to watch my back when it comes to positive and negative results from a serological test just for the COVID-19 issue.
Yeah, well, that's what we say, right? But then, you got this thing called the Patriot Act, right, that allowed these FISA courts, right, and then you had to make a case to the government special court to use these surveillance to look at American people. You could use this against internationals, only internationals, right? But then you see how the government manipulates the power that it's afforded when they go into the FISA courts and come up with shammery reasons to track Americans, and then they get these two-hop warrants that not only tracking an American, but two other people 2 times removed that they may have talked to. So they spread their cheating pandemic on surveillance across to, innumerable amounts of Americans by using one violation of that binary, right? Oh, well, all you're looking at is positive, negative. We know the government doesn't care. When they want to manipulate us, they do it.
You're preaching to the choir.
Oh,
I don't
okay,
trust
good. All right,
government
well.
for anything. But when there's a public health emergency as novel and strange, I'm a microbiologist by training. This is the strangest thing. You can look at polio, you can look at smallpox, you can look at the Spanish flu, you can look at measles, you can look at all these things. This is really strange. And if we don't do what we're doing, we could lose about 3 million Americans. And that's a lot of people. So is this a time when John Locke and Thomas Jefferson say it's the government's responsibility for this one thing? The heck with the Patriot Act, I couldn't agree more. The government knows too much, does too many things wrong, takes our tax dollars for their crony friends. We are on the same page with that. The government isn't too good at anything. The problem is not, as a great American said, the problem is not solved by government in general. The problem is government in general. But in this specific emergency, sometimes our contract or treatise with government by John Locke, I think with the COVID-19, with my libertarian tendencies, I got to say the government's the only one with the skill set. They have the scientists, they have the technology. I would turn over just the positive negative of my COVID-19 and make sure it's limited just to, do I have immunoglobulins? Am I testing positive? Because it sounds like
all you microbiologists are the same. You can be libertarian, but you still trusting in the goodness of government. And as soon as they get a piece of our blood, then they're one step closer to knowing everything about us.
I don't want them to have my blood. I want them to have the results from the blood test.
Oh, I see. I thought you got to send this result in or something.
Well, you can photograph it on your cell phone. There's a million ways to communicate just this one single fact. That, I don't see any other choice. But when it comes to my blood, I don't want the government to know my blood. They'll find I have high cholesterol. My insurance company will cancel me.
That's right.